The night I found the receipt, the house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath, like it already knew something I didn't. I remember standing in the kitchen with my bare feet on the cold tile, the clock blinking 12:47 a.m., and my husband still not home. Again. My phone battery was almost dead, and I kept staring at the front door, waiting to hear his key turn in the lock, but the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft wind touching the windows. That was the moment my chest started to feel tight, the kind of tight that doesn't come from fear, but from knowing the truth is close and you might not survive hearing it. I opened his laptop just to distract myself, just to watch something stupid, but the screen lit up with an email notification before I could click anything. A payment confirmation. Rent payment. Another address. Another apartment. My heart dropped so fast I thought I might faint. We didn't rent anything. We owned this house. So why was my husband paying rent somewhere else? My name is Caitlin, and until that night, I believed I had a perfect marriage. I believed I was lucky. Everyone said so. You two are so sweet together, my friends used to say. He adores you. And maybe he did once. Or maybe I only saw what I wanted to see. We had been married for 8 years. 8 calm, normal, safe years. Sunday breakfasts. Movie nights. Inside jokes. He used to bring me flowers for no reason. He used to kiss my forehead before work. I built my whole world around that man. Around us. But slowly, things changed. So slowly I almost didn't notice. He started coming home late. Traffic, he said. Then, extra meetings. Then, business trips. Always tired. Always distracted. He slept facing the other side of the bed. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped touching me like before. I told myself it was stress. Work problems. Life happens. Marriage isn't always romantic. That's what everyone says, right? But there were small things. Strange things. Phone calls he took outside. Bills I never saw. Charges on the credit card that didn't make sense. A hotel in another city when he said he was staying with a coworker. A gift receipt for baby clothes that he said was for his sister's kid. I wanted to believe him so badly it almost hurt. Loving someone can make you stupid. Or maybe just hopeful. I kept choosing hope. That night, with the laptop glowing in the dark kitchen, my hands started shaking. I clicked the email. It showed a monthly rent payment. Same amount. Same date. Every month. For almost a year. There was an address under it. I wrote it down on a piece of paper like I was copying homework. My brain felt slow, heavy, like it was moving through water. I opened his bank app. I knew his password. He trusted me. Or maybe he thought I would never check. More payments. Utilities. Electricity. Internet. Groceries near that address. My throat closed. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a life. A second life. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, just staring at the wall. I tried to imagine what it meant. Was he hiding money? Gambling? Helping someone? Every answer I made up still felt wrong. Then a darker thought came into my mind, quiet and cold. Another woman. I whispered it out loud, just to hear how it sounded. Another woman. The words tasted bitter. I almost laughed because it felt like something from a cheap TV drama, not my life. Not my careful, boring, stable life. At 1:32 a.m., I finally heard the door open. His keys dropped into the bowl like always. Normal. Casual. Like nothing was broken. He walked in smiling, smelling like a different soap, not ours. "Hey babe, you're still up," he said, kissing my hair. I froze. My body didn't react. I didn't hug him back. For the first time, his touch felt strange, like a stranger touching me. I looked at his face and tried to see if guilt was written somewhere on his skin. But he just looked tired. Ordinary. That almost scared me more. "Long trip?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Exhausting." I nodded and forced a smile. But inside me, something had already cracked open. And once a crack appears, the whole glass will eventually shatter. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply decided something very calm and very dangerous. I would find out everything. Every lie. Every secret. no matter how much it hurt. Because the truth was already knocking on my door. And this time, I wasn't going to pretend I didn't hear it. The next morning I woke up before the sun, before the birds, before even my alarm, and for a few soft seconds my brain was empty and peaceful, like nothing bad had ever happened, like I was still the same happy wife I had been for years. But then I heard his breathing next to me and everything came back at once. The receipt, the rent, the strange address, the quiet kitchen, the cold feeling in my stomach. And it hit me so hard I thought I might throw up. I stayed very still, staring at the ceiling, listening to him sleep, and it scared me how normal he looked, one arm under the pillow, hair messy, mouth slightly open. The same man I had loved for almost a decade. The same man who used to hold my hand in grocery stores. The same man who promised me forever. And yet now he felt like a stranger who had broken into my life and stolen something precious without me noticing. And I realized that the worst kind of betrayal isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet and slow, like water leaking under a door. Before I continue, let me say something small and gentle to you, because maybe you are listening to my story somewhere far away, maybe on your phone, maybe late at night like I was. And if you feel connected to me even a little, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and tell me where you're watching from, because knowing someone is out there makes this loneliness feel lighter, makes this story feel shared instead of heavy on my chest alone. Thank you. Now let me go back to that morning. I slipped out of bed carefully so I wouldn't wake him, and the floor felt cold under my feet, the house too quiet, like it was watching me, and I made coffee but forgot to drink it, just held the mug between my hands like it could warm something inside me that had gone cold. When he finally woke up, he smiled at me and said, "Morning, Kate," using that soft nickname that used to melt me, and I hated that my heart still reacted. That love doesn't die immediately even when trust does. And he moved around the kitchen like always, making toast, checking his phone, scrolling, typing, smiling at something on the screen, and I kept wondering, is it her? Is she texting him good morning? Does she know he slept next to another woman last night? Does she know I exist? Or is she just as blind as I am? And the thought that another woman might be living my same life somewhere else made my skin crawl. He asked, "You okay? You look tired," and I almost laughed because tired was such a small word for what I felt, but I just nodded and said, "Didn't sleep well," and he didn't ask anything else, didn't hug me, didn't look worried, and that hurt more than if he had yelled, because it showed me how far we had already drifted apart. Then he grabbed his keys and said, "Big day today, don't wait up tonight." Like it was nothing. Like those words weren't cutting me open. Don't wait up. Like I wasn't important enough to come home to, and when the door closed the house felt huge and empty and strange, like it didn't belong to me anymore, and something changed inside me right then, something calm and sharp, because the sad, confused wife disappeared and a different version of me appeared, a woman who needed answers more than comfort. So I walked into his office with slow steps and opened his drawers even though it felt wrong, even though part of me still wanted to protect his privacy. But he had already destroyed mine with his lies. I searched through papers, receipts, old notes, and at first it was nothing special, just boring life stuff, until I found an envelope filled with bills from places near that address. Gas stations, grocery stores, a pharmacy. And my heart started racing because these weren't random charges, they were daily life, normal life, the kind of life you build when you live somewhere, not when you visit. And my hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down. But then I found one more thing, something small folded in half like it was a secret, and when I opened it, the world stopped. It was a photo of my husband smiling wider than I had seen in years, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a yellow blanket, looking proud, happy, complete like a father, and the air left my lungs so fast I thought I might faint, because this wasn't just cheating, this wasn't just another woman, this was a child, a family, a whole second life. And in that moment I understood something terrifying. My husband wasn't visiting someone else's world. He had built one, carefully, patiently, while I was at home believing we were happy. Bolum 3. I don't remember how long I sat there with that photo in my hands, only that the light in the room slowly changed from gray to pale yellow, like morning was moving forward without caring that my whole life had just cracked open, and I kept staring at his face in the picture because it didn't look like the man I knew, it looked like someone lighter, freer, happier, and that hurt more than anything else. Because it meant he wasn't just making a mistake or having a short affair, he was choosing that life, smiling in it, loving it, while I was here washing his shirts and waiting for him to come home. My fingers traced the baby's tiny hat in the photo and I felt something strange, not anger at first, but grief, like I had lost something that never even existed, like the future I imagined, our kids, our family, our plans, had quietly been given to someone else without my permission. I put the photo back exactly where I found it, because suddenly I didn't want him to know that I knew. Not yet, not until I understood everything, and I started moving around the house like a spy in my own marriage, opening drawers, checking folders, looking at bank statements more carefully, and the more I searched, the worse it got, like pulling a thread and watching the whole sweater come apart. there were transfers every month. Always the same date. Always the same amount. Enough to pay rent and bills and groceries for a small family. And there were hotel points used in that same area, restaurant payments for 2 people, a furniture store I had never heard of. And I realized he hadn't just been helping someone, he had been fully supporting them, building a comfortable home while telling me we needed to save money and cut back on vacations. I felt stupid remembering all the things I had given up because he said money was tight, the trip to Italy I cancelled, the art classes I wanted to take but didn't, the new couch we postponed buying, and all that time he was paying for another apartment like it was nothing. I laughed out loud at one point, a small broken laugh, because the irony was almost funny, how I had been proud of being a supportive wife. How I had told my friends, it's okay, his job is stressful, we just have to be patient. And now I wanted to go back in time and shake myself, tell myself to open my eyes. Around noon I couldn't sit still anymore, so I grabbed my keys and the paper where I had written the address, and I told myself I was just going for a drive, just to see the place, nothing more, but my hands were sweating on the steering wheel the whole time and my heart was beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The city looked normal, people walking dogs, kids going to school, cars stopping at lights, and it felt unfair that the world was so calm while my world was burning down. And I kept thinking, maybe there's a simple explanation, maybe it's not what I think, maybe I'm overreacting, because hope is very stubborn, it doesn't die easily, even when it should. When my GPS said I was close, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might turn around, but I didn't. I forced myself to keep driving until I saw the building, a small clean apartment complex with white walls and little balconies with plants, the kind of place young families live in, not some secret, dirty motel, and that made it worse somehow, because it looked warm, safe, normal like a home. I parked across the street and just watched, my fingers tight around the steering wheel, telling myself to breathe, counting slowly like I used to do during anxiety attacks, and then I saw something that made my whole body freeze. His car. Parked right in front. Not at work. Not in a meeting. Right there. For a second everything went silent, like the world had been muted, and all I could think was, he lied again, even today, even this morning. He looked into my eyes and lied so easily, and something inside me finally snapped, not loudly, not dramatic, just a quiet break, like glass cracking under pressure, and the love I had been protecting so carefully suddenly felt smaller, weaker, like it couldn't survive this anymore. I watched the entrance door like a crazy person, afraid and desperate at the same time, and after a few minutes the door opened and a woman stepped out holding a baby, and I swear my heart stopped, because the baby was wrapped in the same yellow blanket from the photo, and she looked tired but gentle, kissing the baby's forehead, rocking him softly, and she didn't look like a villain or a thief or some evil person, she just looked normal, kind, human, and that confused me so much I almost cried, because I wanted to hate her, but all I saw was another woman living her life, completely unaware that somewhere across the street, I was sitting in my car, watching my husband's secret family breathe. I don't know how long I stayed in that car, watching her from across the street like a ghost outside someone else's life, but time felt strange, stretched and slow, like every second lasted a minute, and I kept telling myself to look away, to start the engine and go home and pretend I had never seen any of this, because once you see the truth you can never go back to the comfortable lie, and part of me still wanted that lie, still wanted my old simple life where my biggest problem was what to cook for dinner. The woman adjusted the baby on her shoulder and smiled down at him, and the way she moved was so natural, so loving that my chest ached, because that should have been me one day, that should have been our child, our life, and instead I was sitting alone in a car like a stranger spying on my own husband. Then the building door opened again and he walked out, my husband, my best friend, my supposed partner for life, wearing the blue shirt I had ironed for him that morning, and he looked relaxed, not stressed like he always claimed, not tired, just calm and happy, and when he reached her he leaned down and kissed her cheek so softly, so familiar, like he had done it 1,000 times, and she smiled at him the same way I used to smile, and I felt something break inside my ribs. Something physical. Like my heart actually tore. He took the baby from her arms with such confidence, like he had done this every day, like he knew exactly how to hold him, and the baby grabbed his finger and he laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from him in years, and in that moment I realized something that hurt more than the cheating itself. He wasn't pretending there, he was real. And that meant the version of him at home with me was the fake one. Tears started falling before I even noticed, hot and fast, and I wiped them angrily because I didn't want to cry for him anymore, didn't want to give him that power, but my body didn't listen, and I just sat there shaking while they talked and smiled and looked like a normal little family, like a picture from a magazine, and it felt so unfair I almost screamed. I wanted to run across the street and yell at them, to throw the truth in their faces, to ask him how he could do this to me, to us. But my legs wouldn't move. And maybe deep down I was afraid of what would happen if I stepped into that scene, like I would disappear completely, like there would be no place left for me. After a while they got into his car together, the baby seat already installed in the back like it had always belonged there, and that detail made me feel sick, because it meant planning, months of planning, not some mistake or accident, and when they drove away I followed them without thinking, keeping distance like some kind of detective in a bad movie, my heart racing every time a light turned red, afraid I would lose them, afraid I would find them both at the same time. They stopped at a small grocery store and went inside together, and through the window I watched him push the cart while she checked a list on her phone, arguing softly about brands, laughing, choosing fruit, just normal couple things, the boring everyday stuff that actually means intimacy, and it hit me that he had been living two complete lives, not half of one with me and half with her, but two full ones, like he had cloned himself. I felt stupid remembering all the nights I ate dinner alone because he said he was working late, all the messages I sent like drive safe and miss you, while he was probably here buying diapers and milk with her, and anger finally replaced the sadness, hot and sharp and clean, and for the first time that day I stopped crying and started thinking clearly, because this wasn't just heartbreak anymore, this was betrayal on a level I couldn't ignore, and I deserved answers, and she deserved answers too, even if she didn't know it yet. I didn't see an enemy anymore, I saw another woman who had probably been lied to just like me, another woman building her life on the same false promises, and that thought changed something inside me, because suddenly this wasn't me versus her, it was both of us versus him. When they left the store I didn't follow again. Instead I sat there gripping the steering wheel and made a quiet decision that scared me even more than spying had. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore, I wasn't going to just cry in my car like a victim, I was going to talk to him, look him in the eye, and make him explain every single lie, and if he thought he could keep juggling two families forever, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Because the woman he married might have been patient and trusting, but the woman sitting in that parking lot now was done being blind. By the time I drove home, my tears were gone and replaced with something colder, something steady, like ice running through my veins instead of blood, and I realized I wasn't shaking anymore, because shock has a strange limit, and once you cross it, you don't feel softer, you feel harder, sharper, more dangerous, like there's nothing left to lose. The house looked the same as always when I pulled into the driveway, the curtains still, the flowers by the door still alive. Everything so normal it almost made me laugh, because how could a place look so peaceful when the truth inside it was so ugly? And I sat in the car for a minute staring at the front door, remembering all the times he had carried groceries in, all the times we had kissed goodbye right there, and it felt like those memories belonged to another woman, not me, like I was remembering someone else's marriage. Inside, the silence wrapped around me again, but this time it didn't feel empty, it felt fake like a stage set in a play, and I walked slowly through each room, touching things without thinking. The couch we chose together, the photos on the wall, our wedding picture where we both looked so young and stupidly happy, and I stopped in front of that photo for a long time, studying his smile, wondering if he had already been capable of this back then, or if something changed later, and I hated that. I couldn't tell because it meant I had never really known the man I married. I picked up the frame and turned it face down on the table, because suddenly I couldn't stand the way we looked together, like a lie frozen in time. All afternoon I planned what to say, replaying conversations in my head, imagining myself screaming, throwing things, crying, but every version felt wrong and weak, so instead I decided something simple. I would be calm, because calm is scarier than anger, and I wanted him to feel scared for once. I cooked dinner like usual, set the table like usual, even lit a small candle like I sometimes did, and the normality of it all felt almost funny. Like I was preparing a scene for a movie where the husband has no idea his life is about to explode, and part of me watched myself from outside thinking, look at you, acting like everything is fine, but it wasn't pretending, it was strategy, because I didn't want him to hide behind excuses or leave the house before I got answers. He texted around 7, saying, running late. Don't wait up. Those same 3 words again, like a habit, like he didn't even think about them anymore, and instead of crying like I used to, I just stared at the message and typed back, it's okay. Dinner's ready. I'll wait. And for the first time I imagined him reading that and feeling confused, maybe even nervous, and that gave me a small dark satisfaction. When he finally came home it was almost 10, and I heard his key in the door, the familiar sound that used to make me happy, and my heart started beating faster but not from love, from anticipation, like before a storm, and he walked in smiling, loosening his tie, saying, hey, sorry, crazy day. Like always, like he had rehearsed this line 1,000 times, and he kissed my cheek and asked what smelled so good, and I looked at him and thought, how can you act so normal after holding another woman and another child today? How can you walk into this house like you didn't just lie straight to my face this morning? And I realized he must have done this for months, maybe a year, switching between lives like changing jackets. We sat at the table together and he started eating, talking about work, about traffic, about some coworker drama, And his voice sounded far away like I was underwater, and I watched his mouth move and thought, every word is a lie, even the small ones, and suddenly I felt tired, not weak tired, but old tired like I had aged 10 years in one day, and I didn't want to play this game anymore, didn't want to listen to another fake story. So I reached into my pocket slowly and placed the folded photo on the table between us without saying anything. He kept talking for 2 more seconds before noticing, then his voice stopped mid-sentence, and the silence that followed was so heavy it felt alive, and I watched his face carefully as he opened the photo, and I saw it happen. The color draining from his skin, the small panic in his eyes, the way his fingers froze. And in that exact moment, before he even said a word, I knew everything. Because guilty people have a very specific look when their secret is finally seen. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms and spoke as calmly as I could, my voice almost soft, which surprised even me, and I said, "Who is the baby?" For a few long seconds he didn't answer. He just stared at the photo like it might disappear if he looked at it hard enough, and I watched every small movement in his face, the tight jaw, the fast blinking, the way his throat moved when he swallowed, and it was strange how clearly I could see him now, like the love had been a filter over my eyes for years and someone had suddenly removed it. Because this man sitting in front of me wasn't confused or surprised. He was calculating, searching for the safest lie, and that hurt more than any confession could have. Finally he looked up at me and said, "Where did you get that?" And his voice sounded thin, weak, nothing like the confident tone he always used, and I almost laughed because it was such a stupid question, like the location of the photo mattered more than the truth inside it. "I asked you something first," I said quietly. "Who is the baby?" He rubbed his face with both hands and leaned back in the chair like he was the victim, like this was hard for him, and for a second the old me almost felt sorry for him, almost wanted to comfort him, and that made me angry at myself, because how many times had I protected his feelings while he destroyed mine? He started talking slowly, broken sentences. "It's not what you think. It's complicated. I was going to tell you." All the classic lines people use when they've been caught, and each word made me colder, because if you really plan to tell the truth, you don't hide it for a year. "Don't lie," I said. "Please don't insult me with lies. I saw the apartment. I saw her. I saw you holding him." When I said that, his eyes widened, real fear this time, because he understood how much I knew, and the room felt too small suddenly, like the walls were closing in on both of us, and then he finally said it, almost whispering. "He's my son." And even though I already knew, hearing it out loud felt like being punched in the stomach, and for a second I couldn't breathe, because those 3 words made everything real in a way nothing else could. "Your son," I repeated, like I was learning a new language. "So you have a child. A whole child. And you never told me." "It just happened," he said quickly. "It wasn't planned. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at him. A baby doesn't just happen for a year. Rent doesn't just happen every month. Love doesn't just happen by accident. He tried to explain then, talking too fast, saying he met her during a work trip, saying it started small, saying he felt lonely, saying we had grown distant, like somehow our normal marriage problems had pushed him into another woman's arms, and I felt my anger rising like fire, because he was trying to share the blame, trying to make me part of the reason, and that was something I would not accept. "So this is my fault?" I asked. "No, that's not what I mean." "Did I ask you to cheat? Did I ask you to lie every day? Did I ask you to build another family behind my back?" He had no answer. He just looked down at the table like a child being scolded, and I suddenly realized how small he really was, how weak, how ordinary, and it shocked me because for years I had seen him as my hero, my safe place, and now he just looked like a scared man who couldn't take responsibility for his own choices. "I didn't want to lose you," he said softly. That sentence broke something inside me, not because it was sad, but because it was so selfish. "So you decided to have both?" I said. "2 women. 2 homes. 2 lives. And you thought you deserved that." He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. He just stayed silent. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and I felt strangely calm, like my tears had completely dried up forever. "Does she know about me?" I asked. He hesitated. That tiny pause told me everything. "No," he said. "Of course she didn't." So there it was. 2 women. 1 liar. And suddenly my anger shifted away from her completely. Because she wasn't stealing my life. He was. He had lied to both of us, used both of us, loved both of us only halfway. I grabbed my coat and my keys. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic rising in his voice. "To meet her," I said. Because she deserves the truth too. He stood up so fast his chair almost fell, his face pale, his hands shaking, and for the first time that night he looked truly afraid. Not of losing me, not of hurting me, but of losing control, because as long as I didn't know and she didn't know, he could manage both worlds. He could keep lying and smiling and pretending to be a good man, but the moment we talked to each other, his perfect little system would collapse and he knew it. "Caitlin, don't," he said quickly, walking toward me. "Please, you're emotional right now, you'll just make things worse." And it almost made me laugh how predictable that was. How men like him always call women emotional when they're scared of the truth coming out, like anger and pain are irrational but cheating for a year is somehow logical. "I'm very calm," I said, and my voice surprised even me because it was steady and cold, like ice water. "Calmer than I've ever been." "You don't understand," he continued, running his hands through his hair. "She doesn't know anything about you, this will destroy her." I looked straight into his eyes. "Good. Because you destroyed me." He tried to block the door, not aggressively, just desperately, like a man trying to stop a train with his hands, and for a second I saw the person I used to love, scared and small, and it hurt, but not enough to stop me because love without respect is just a cage, and I was done being trapped. "Please," he whispered. "We can fix this, we can talk, I'll end it, I promise." And those words finally made me angry again. Because end it, like she was just a mistake, like the baby was just a problem. To delete. And I realized he wasn't loyal to either of us. He was only loyal to himself. "You don't get to choose anymore," I said quietly. "You lost that right." I stepped around him and walked out the door before my courage could disappear, and the cold night air hit my face like a slap, waking me up fully, and my heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out, but my legs kept moving, one step after another, like they already knew where to go. The drive felt shorter this time, maybe because there was no more doubt left, no more hope, just truth, heavy and clear. And when I parked near the apartment building again my hands were shaking. But not from fear of him, from fear of her. Because what do you even say to the woman who unknowingly shares your husband? How do you start that conversation? "Hi, I'm the legal wife, surprise, your life is a lie too?" I sat in the car for a minute practicing sentences in my head, all of them sounding stupid, dramatic or cruel, and I didn't want to hurt her more than necessary, because none of this was her fault, and that thought kept repeating in my mind like a prayer. It's not her fault, it's not her fault, and somehow that gave me strength, because this wasn't about jealousy anymore, it was about truth, about two women who deserved better than one selfish man. I walked to the building slowly, my footsteps echoing on the concrete, and my chest felt tight like the first day of school when you don't know anyone, and I checked the address again just to be sure, then stood in front of the door and stared at the number for a few seconds, wondering how many times he had stood here smiling, holding flowers, pretending to be single, and that image made my stomach turn. Finally I knocked, soft at first, then louder, and I heard footsteps inside and the faint sound of the baby crying, and my heart almost jumped out of my chest. The door opened. She stood there in sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, hair messy, eyes tired, the baby on her hip, and up close she looked even more human, more real, not some fantasy rival, just a young mother trying her best, and for a second we just stared at each other, both confused, both strangers, and she gave me a small polite smile and said, "Hi, can I help you?" My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to speak, because this was the moment everything changed, for both of us. "Yes," I said softly. "I think we need to talk about the same man." Bolam 8. For a second she didn't understand what I meant, and I could see it in her eyes, that polite confusion people have when a stranger says something strange at their door, and she adjusted the baby on her hip and gave me a small nervous smile like maybe I had the wrong apartment, like maybe this was all just a mistake, and part of me wished it was, wished I could laugh and say sorry and go home and forget everything, but my heart was beating too hard, too real, and I knew there was no going back. "Now, I'm sorry," she said softly. "Do we know each other?" And her voice was gentle, tired, kind, and that made this so much harder because it would have been easier if she were cruel or cold, easier to hate her, easier to blame her, but she just looked like someone who hadn't slept much in months. "My name is Caitlin," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And this is going to sound strange, but I'm married to Daniel." Saying "my husband" felt wrong now, like the word didn't belong to me anymore, like it had lost its meaning. Her smile slowly disappeared. "Daniel?" she repeated, like she was checking the name in her head, and then she gave a small confused laugh. "My Daniel." That word hit me. I nodded. "Yes, you're Daniel. The same one." The baby started crying softly, and she rocked him automatically, but her eyes never left mine, and I watched the moment the fear enter her face, the tiny crack when reality starts to break through, and she stepped back without realizing it, like my words had physically pushed her. I I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't understand either, I said. Not until yesterday. I took a slow breath and told her everything, simple and calm, like reading facts from a paper. 8 years of marriage, our house, our life, the late nights, the lies, the rent payments, the photo, and while I talked her face changed color, from pink to white, and her lips started shaking, and she kept saying no, under her breath like if she repeated it enough the story would change. When I finished, the hallway felt too quiet, like the whole world was listening. He told me he was single, she said finally, her voice breaking. He said his last relationship ended years ago. He said he wanted a family. He said he loved me. I felt tears in my eyes again, but not just for me this time. He told me the same things, I said. We just stood there, 2 women, 1 baby between us, both lied to, both fooled, both hurting in the exact same way, and suddenly it felt stupid to see each other as enemies, because we weren't rivals, we were victims of the same man, trapped in the same story. I'm not here to fight you, I said quietly. I just thought you deserved the truth. She nodded slowly, tears falling down her cheeks, and after a long silence she whispered, Thank you for telling me. Bolam 9. She moved aside and silently invited me in, and stepping into that apartment felt like walking into an alternate version of my own life, like entering a mirror world where everything was similar but not quite the same, and my chest tightened as I noticed the small details that proved how real this place was, how permanent, how planned, because there were baby bottles drying near the sink, a tiny blanket folded on the couch, diapers stacked neatly in a corner, a framed photo of Daniel holding the baby on the shelf, and I realized this wasn't some secret escape or temporary mistake. This was a home, warm and lived in, and he had built it carefully while still coming back to me every night pretending nothing was wrong. She sat down slowly with the baby, like her legs couldn't carry her anymore, and I sat across from her, both of us quiet for a moment, just listening to the baby's soft breathing, and it was strange how calm the room felt compared to the storm inside me, like the world didn't match the pain, and I studied her face more closely now, the dark circles under her eyes, the tired but gentle expression, the way she kept kissing the baby's head without thinking, and I saw love there, real love, not manipulation, not lies, and it made me hate him even more, because he hadn't just cheated, he had used her dreams too. How long have you 2 been together? She asked softly. 8 years married, I said. Almost 10 together. Her eyes filled with tears again. I've known him for 2 years, she whispered. The baby is 6 months old. 2 years. That meant almost half of our marriage overlapped with her life. The math made me dizzy. While I was celebrating anniversaries with him, he was probably here painting this baby's room. While I was waiting for him during business trips, he was sleeping in this bed. The double life wasn't short or accidental. It was organized. Chosen. He said he wanted to marry me one day, she said, her voice shaking. He talked about buying a bigger place, about our future. I gave a sad, tired smile. He told me we should wait to have kids because the timing wasn't right. For a second we both laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh, it was the kind that comes right before crying, because the irony was so cruel it almost felt like a joke. The same man. The same promises. Different women. Same lies. I feel so stupid, she said. Me too, I replied. But we're not, I added after a moment. He is. We looked at each other then, really looked, and something changed, something soft but strong like an invisible thread connecting us, because only we understood this exact pain, only we knew what it felt like to love someone who never truly existed, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone. I felt supported, like maybe we could stand together instead of breaking separately. My name is Emma, she said quietly. Caitlin, I answered. She nodded. What are you going to do? I thought about him sitting at home, probably panicking, probably calling my phone over and over, trying to control the damage, and instead of fear, I felt clarity. A clean, sharp clarity. I'm leaving him, I said. And I'm divorcing him. She looked down at her baby, then back at me, and her voice was stronger this time. Then, I think I will too. And in that small apartment, surrounded by the pieces of the life he built with lies, we made the same decision without even planning it. He thought he had 2 women. But he forgot something important. Women talk. Women survive. And sometimes, we choose each other. Bolam 10. Final. The strange thing about heartbreak is that you expect it to be loud and dramatic, like screaming or throwing things or collapsing on the floor, but for me the end of my marriage was quiet, almost peaceful, like the moment after a storm when the air feels clean and everything is still. And as Emma and I sat there in her small living room with the baby sleeping between us, I realized I wasn't shaking anymore, I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry in that wild way, because the truth had burned through me so completely that only calm was left, a deep calm that comes when you finally stop fighting reality and simply accept it. Daniel wasn't the love of my life, he wasn't my forever, he wasn't even a good man, he was just a chapter, and chapters end. My phone started buzzing on the table again and again, his name lighting up the screen over and over like a warning sign, calls, messages, voice notes, and each vibration felt smaller than the last, like he was shrinking with every second, and Emma looked at the screen and then at me and asked softly, "Are you going to answer?" And I stared at his name for a long moment, remembering all the nights I used to wait for his calls, worried if he was safe, missing him like crazy, and now the only thing I felt was distance, like he was already someone from my past, like an old coworker or a neighbor I barely knew. So I simply turned the phone off and the silence that followed felt powerful, like I had just cut the last string tying me to him. We talked for hours after that, not about him at first but about ourselves, about who we were before Daniel, about the things we liked, the dreams we had put on hold, the careers we paused, the trips we never took, and it felt almost funny how quickly we connected, like old friends instead of strangers, because pain has a way of making people honest, and there was no reason to pretend with each other. She told me how scared she had been to raise a baby alone, how she trusted Daniel because he seemed so stable and kind, and I told her how I had slowly made my world smaller for my marriage, how I stopped choosing myself, and the more we talked the more I realized something important. We didn't lose him, we escaped him. That night I went back home one last time, and when I opened the door he was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands, looking tired and messy and smaller than I had ever seen him, and he stood up fast when he saw me like a child waiting for punishment, asking where I had been, saying he was worried, saying we could fix this, saying he loved me, and the words sounded empty, like lines from a bad movie. Because love without honesty isn't love at all, it's just control. I walked past him calmly and started packing a suitcase, and he followed me around the house talking and talking and talking, promises, excuses, apologies, blaming stress, blaming fear, blaming anything except himself, and I realized he still didn't understand, he still thought this was negotiable. "I met her," I said simply. He stopped talking. "She knows everything." The silence in the room was heavy. "And I'm filing for divorce," I added. He started crying then, real tears, begging me not to destroy our life, and for a second I almost pitied him, but then I remembered Emma's tired eyes, the baby in his arms, the months of lies, the empty bed, the lonely dinners, and my heart hardened again, because he didn't cry when he lied to me, he didn't cry when he built another family, he only cried when he finally had consequences. A week later I moved into a small apartment of my own, nothing fancy, just clean and bright and quiet, but it felt more like home than that big house ever did, because every corner belonged only to me, no secrets, no hidden lives, and I started doing small things just for myself, drinking coffee on the balcony, taking long walks, signing up for an art class I had postponed for years, calling old friends, laughing again. And slowly, day by day, the heavy weight inside my chest got lighter. Emma. And I kept talking too, checking on each other, sometimes meeting at a park while the baby slept in the stroller, two women who should have hated each other but instead became stronger together, and every time Daniel called or texted with, "I miss you," or "Please come back," we both ignored him, because some doors once closed, should never open again. Now when I look back at that night in the kitchen, the glowing laptop, the receipt, the quiet house, I almost want to thank that moment, because it broke my heart but saved my life. And if you ask me today who I am, I'm not just someone's wife anymore. Not someone waiting at home for a man who doesn't respect me. I'm Caitlin, a woman who survived betrayal, who chose truth over comfort, who rebuilt herself from nothing. And if you're listening to my story and you feel something is wrong in your life too, please trust that feeling. Be brave, choose yourself, because sometimes losing the person you thought you needed is exactly how you finally find peace.